This is the third day and we're winding down. I'm super excited that you all have either logged on, stayed, and we should have a lot of fun and great discussion. My name is Vicki Bean, and we're here at the Auburn Avenue Research Library celebrating our 30th anniversary here at the corners of Auburn and Cortland. And with our celebration, we have invited some wonderful guests and our moderator, Dr. Shady Radical, who is here to discuss disappearing acts, how artists can curate performances for future researchers. And with her on this panel is our wonderful all urban alternative culture presenter on jazz here at 91.9 FM worldwide, WCLK, Mr. Jamal Ahmad. Through his nationally syndicated radio shows, The Sound of Universal Love and The Soul of Jazz, Ahmad has introduced some of modern music's most innovative artists and influential voices to a wider audience. As a music producer, Ahmad's band, the Dangerfield Newbies, has released music on Japanese label Sweet Soul Records and the renowned UK dance label Defected Records. Ahmad recently wrote, produced, and directed his first documentary. Well, you know it's not going to be his last. Stepping into Tomorrow, the story of jazz funk and the music that changed the world, with Jason Orr. The film features icons such as George Duke, Al Jarreau, George Benson, Robert Glasper, DJ Jazzy Jeff, and Marley Marl, among others. Ahmad's contributions have earned him numerous accolades, including a proclamation from the City of Atlanta, the Cultural Warrior Award from the National Black Arts Festival, and recognition as a two-time winner of Best DJ from Creative Loafing and Best Afternoon Drive Announcer from the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. Not only do we have Mr. Jamal Ahmed, we also have Miss Myrna Clayton. Miss Myrna Clayton, or as others call her, America's Songbird, Myrna Clayton, Alabama born, Atlanta raised, and she stressed that in her bio, is a singer best known as a performer of jazz music, commissioned by the U.S. State Department to represent American music abroad at U.S. embassies around the world. Ms. Myrna has performed in 5 of the 7 continents, including countries such as France, Germany, Russia, Namibia, Guatemala, the Baltics, Switzerland, and most recently Ghana's 2024 Jazz in January Festival. Dear to Ms. Myrna's heart is advocacy for accessibility for performing artists across the disability spectrum to highlight their talents and help improve their career trajectory and life possibilities. Whether performing in the United States or abroad, America's Songbird, Myrna Clayton's classy performances are simply unforgettable. And next to Ms. Clayton is Mr. Carlton Hargro, who has worked as an editor for a variety of local and national magazines, newspapers, and websites. He served stints as the first African American editor-in-chief of the alternative news weekly Creative Loafing, and here in Atlanta and Charlotte, North Carolina, where he helped the media outlet garner a number of awards from groups like the North Carolina Press Association and the Association of Alternative News Weeklies. Currently, Carlton is the editor-in-chief, co-publisher of Slo Mo Media, where he covers soul music and culture. Co-writer, co-publisher at the comic book company 20th Place Media, and creator, host of the comic-focused podcast Superpower to the People. And who's rallying all this good information and all of our guest speaker is Dr. Shady Radical. I'm sorry. Thank you for the reminder. Dr. Shady Radical is a mother, performance archivist, educator, and founder of the Radical Archive of Preservation, LLC. Her interest in preserving Black memory, production culture, and women's work has led her to earn a PhD in moving image stories at Georgia State University, an MA in Costume and Curatorial Studies from New York University, a BA in Art History from the College of St. Elizabeth, and an AA in Fashion Business from Berkeley College. Her professional experiences include working in Atlanta's film and television industry, teaching art histories at Spelman College, curating art shows, and in carving and archiving the work of Black performance companies. This year, she serves as a board member for the Society of Georgia Archivists and co-chair of DANCE, USA's Archiving and Preservation Group. Currently, she is working with Bawagamoya. Thank you. It's different when you're reading it on the screen, but Africulture in Tanzania, the Bella Ethnic Dance Company in East Point, Georgia, and serving as a senior archivist at Heritage Works in Beaufort, Georgia. And as a social justice fellow in the MLIS program at University of Alabama, she is committed to finding ways local communities can protect and share their memories with limited resources. So, without further ado, we're going to give a hand to everyone. We appreciate them, and we hope and we know you will enjoy today's preservation.
Thank you so much for the introduction. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you. First, I would like to thank Ms. Vicki Bean for inviting me to this panel, for inviting us, for giving us a great prompt that I am so excited to talk about. Derek Mosley, who is my own mentor and the incoming Society of American Archivists president and fellow, and also Tamika Strong, who has also been a really great support in the community in archiving. So thank you so much to Auburn Avenue Research Library for supporting our work. I want to start with the question, right? Ways libraries help artists capture their work for public or scholarly research. So I thought about this question. I've thought about this question so many times. I was also married to a musician at one point, so I was thinking about everyone that could help, everyone that could help him. So some of those ideas that came to mind is offer performance space and opportunities, help publish their work, some oral history projects, recording space, resources for grant writing, working with curators to organize exhibitions, social media promotion and marketing. Libraries can also act as repositories and offer digital storage space. In my experience, that has always been an issue with artists that have limited resources because, they may have a hard drive, a thumb drive, they may even have a laptop, but when those things, go away, then their records go away. So oftentimes I become the archive for their materials just by way of having a copy of it. But that means I also have a 14 terabyte hard drive at home. I also have so much cloud space that I'm funding myself. So offering that digital space would be helpful. Free workshops on how to preserve picture documents, clothing. You heard earlier about Sierra King's Build Your Archive project. She offers free workshops at libraries and bookstores around the neighborhood. Partner with community archives that focus on preserving performance work. Hire artists to produce programs, document and exhibit, and keep their work in circulation. This whole list of things is what Auburn Avenue does already. I have also participated in a few different programs helping artists on this very, very stage to perform their work and document their work, recording their work right now and keeping it in their archive. The writer's room, the resources, there's an archive here at the library. So all of these things, the question that we were asked is stuff that Auburn Avenue also does. So thank you. So, my question to the panel, this esteemed panel, I am very excited to speak to all of you today. Let's talk about your own archives. What does your archives look like? What does archive mean to you as a musician, as a singer, as a writer? What does it mean to have an archive, keep an archive, and manage your archive?
Thank you for letting me go with that. I am not. I felt so good listening to the other persons in the panel before us. I'm not the most organized person, and so I would like to. But I never throw anything away. I think that I make sure that it's there. But one of the things, my mom, God rest her soul, was an archivist, and two things were important for her when assessing things. One was the date, to record the date, and then where it was that you recorded this. And so I try at least to acknowledge those two things with whatever I'm doing. I have everything on a hard drive or a thumb drive, and even that has a date on it. Just trying to keep whatever I've recorded. I'm utilizing now more and more because as an artist who chose not to put out a lot of original music, I chose that because I felt as an artist it wasn't a return on my investment. And so I needed to have proof that I was performing, and so proof and evidence became videos. And so I have a virtual assistant, and all of that's on YouTube. And so I'm putting things out on YouTube as proof and evidence that I performed and that I've been performing, and we're gathering things from other countries or other cultures that were on YouTube that they put out 10 years ago or whatever, and just capturing all that and putting that in my own repository on my YouTube page, just to be able to capture as proof and evidence, as well as flyers, that have me there, and things like that, because that information is not anywhere else. And because I'm an independent artist, then it's up to me to sort of capture that and to keep that, because there's nobody else that's gonna do it. And so that's where I am in that space as an independent artist that is having to do it all independently for myself, and to figure out how best to make sure that that I have access and that others will have access to it, because it's not, people will say, well, where can I get that? And again, don't have a hard copy. And nowadays in America, since we just learned about Japan, nowadays in America, it's not like we have CDs available, because people don't buy those anymore. So it's like, okay, so how can I show and prove, other than being on the social media and being on platforms that give evidence to the performances that we do. That's for me.
Thank you.
But you got
For me, I kind of split it up two ways. One is I keep physical editions of stuff that I've done, like magazines I've worked on, newspapers, anything we publish, the comic books we publish. And even sometimes I keep like written stuff. Like one time I was on a panel with Ninth Wonder, and somebody asked him, what's the top 50 hip hop songs of all time? He wrote them out by hand. I got that. I said, let me put that in there. So I got, copies of those. So things like that, physical stuff. I have a storage unit, and I collect comics too, and I have like 10,000 comic books, and I have them all in storage. Now they're not organized. That's the thing. So with me, like, I'm able to edit what I keep, because as an editor, I'm just editing life. So I'm editing the stuff that I keep, and I'm throwing stuff out. But digitally, I'm a terrible editor. I keep everything digitally. And I have files, I have, jump thumb drives. I have stuff that I can't even use anymore, like those big old flash drive things from back in the day. I have those things. I have a lot of stuff, like I even have like a few like old computers with just stuff on it. Some like I don't have access to anymore because they like the motherboard is messed up or whatever. But anyway, digitally I keep too much stuff. I need to be better about that. But I keep a lot of stuff. I keep notes from stories. I keep Word documents of stories I've worked on. I have a lot of recordings of interviews that I've done. I know a guy who did a lot of interviews, Craig Seymour, who wrote the Luther Vandross biography. He keeps a lot of, he tapes, and he will put the tapes online. He will put them on YouTube and places like that so people can listen to them, SoundCloud. Now, I can't do that because my interviews are terrible. Like, when I do interviews, like, with people, they are the worst conversations. But when I write them, you wouldn't know how bad it was, you know, but it's so awkward and strange. But he, you know, his sound good. So I have the digital, you know, interviews I've done with artists, you know, all kind of people. Any video I might have got from people, I've had those too. But yeah, I need to be, the key now is like, I'm trying to organize all that digital stuff and trying to like delete. I have multiple files, duplicates of one thing. Like if it was in print, I don't really need to do that probably. Like I may have a cover of a magazine. I'll have a big high res one, and I'll have a small one I can use online. And like it's just really going through that stuff. I mean, it takes time, but it's something that is important. And then finding a place to put it, even to, because I can't keep them on those computers. You know, like I need to put them somewhere where I can have access to them. So anyway, yeah, that's kind of, you know, I try to keep my hand on everything in terms of digitally. Print, I'm very good about editing stuff, and I have copies of magazines and newspapers like that never went online. Like I did stuff for Upscale, they were not online, and that stuff you can't find online. So that's, yeah, I mean, I don't know if that answers the question, but it's I need to be more organized about the digital stuff, but the print, I'm pretty good with that.
Thank you.
You know, yeah, clap my organization.
You know, as a, ooh, my mic is louder than everybody's. Good Lord.
Wait.
Mics to your mouths. Bring up, I'm a DJ, so this is what we do. Check one. But you know, the one thing about being a DJ, especially in radio has a very terrible history of archiving and preserving. I remember reading a story about this woman. It was a black woman in Philadelphia, I think, who in 1980 something, the early 80s actually, decided to tape everything she saw on television.
Yes.
And she did it for like over 20 something years, where whatever was on TV, she would just put the VHS tape in and just let it run. And she kept doing that for decades. And she passed away, and actually now her recordings are being utilized by the Television Hall of Fame to document an era, because a lot of people were just watching and not recording at that time. So as a DJ, I think we as radio people have done such a terrible job at preserving our culture. And so I always try to make sure, and I have my coworker here, my good sister, Ms. Deb Moore, at Jazz 91.9 WCLK. Y'all can show her some love, because she is truly a legend here in the city of Atlanta as well. But when we do interviews, when we do specials, we record them. You know, we make sure that we document them every single time. I just did a 5-hour tribute to Quincy Jones just recently. And Deb did an incredible tribute to Quincy. We all wanted to pay homage to the GOAT. And we all needed to pay homage to the GOAT. I think there needs to be 100 more tributes to Quincy Jones, because he deserves them all. But we decided to make sure that we document that. Because when you document things too, you have to remember that you can utilize those in real time, not just for generations to come, but in real time. You can actually submit those things to receive awards, and in turn, that will help you archive. And so as a DJ, when it comes to being on the radio, I think it's very important for us. You know, I've been on the radio for 30 years, and I have every Friday night when I would go on, I will always put tapes in. And I have boxes of tapes. boxes of CDs that I want to get transferred to a digital thing, because when I listened to one tape from like 1998, and I said, this is a special moment for us as a people, because here we are being really adventurous. There were so many different styles that I was playing representing where we were as a people at that particular time, and sometimes we don't think that we were that. But when you look back, it's like, whoa, it's just like when we look back on, the 1940s, and you don't think that people were radical beings in the 1940s, but there was some radical people doing some incredible things that were poorly documented, but people still found out about them. So as a DJ as well, one thing about DJs that I find so important is that DJs always call the DJs probably music's most important and essential archivists, because DJs know the history. The history is in the records. Like when you look at recording history, it's always in the records. Those artists did incredible shows. They performed all over the world. We can find some of these live recordings. They're still releasing live recordings, especially in jazz music. They're finding these recordings that were done at little dives and bars all across America that are being remastered. But we have to remember that the essence of music is always in the recording. No matter what you feel, no matter what you think. That's why it's so important to put that stuff on tape, on black wax. Whatever it is, you have to put it down because it's going to be forgotten. So for me, as a recording artist as well, I have made it a point to make sure that I do physical copies of all my releases. Because and also with your master, people forget that masters in music used to be a physical master, used to be a physical tape. But I don't know if anyone remembers the huge fire that Universal experienced some years ago, where one of their warehouses burnt down, and you had thousands of recordings from Louis Armstrong and Sarah Vaughan and legends that were just completely destroyed. And that was a shock to me, and I said, whoa, I hope that all that stuff was backed up. So even when you have those physical pieces, you have to have those digital backups, and you have to have a backup of the backup, because we know that files, the things that you save anything on can be corrupted, and I've experienced that. So it's always important to have a backup of the backup.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Yes. That brings me to another question. One, you are all doing your own preservation work. You all have your own preservation practices. One question is, how can libraries help that practice? How can libraries help you, right? But on the other side of that question, I wonder how much you all rely on your affiliated organizations, whether it's the radio station, to keep that legacy for you. Like, how much is it their responsibility to preserve your work? So both, or either one of those questions, if you want to answer.
Well, yeah, that's actually a very good question, because when you think about especially public radio, because I think about the station I work at, WCLK, which is celebrating its 50th year. Y'all can put your hands together, because that's amazing to have an African American ran jazz radio station celebrate that long. It's just absolutely amazing. But
and you've been there for 30
and I've been there for 30 of those years, which is crazy. And I was there when I was like a baby. I was like literally born.
There.
The year, I can't say I was born there. That'd be cool, right? That'd be a great story. But no, I remember my mother worked at Clark at the time and bought me and my twin sister there when we were infants. So I've been around that station for a long time. But I always felt that we could do, this is no diss to WCLK, but this is kind of a charge to all public radio stations. We have to understand that we are the keepers of our culture right now. And especially when you think about the fact that there are so many content creators who are creating content about our culture. And of course, culture is universal. Culture belongs to everyone. But we know that when you talk about popular music culture comes from the African American community, all styles. And so when you think about our culture and how we can preserve our culture as a radio, just a radio station, we can do things like just archive all the moments. And we've done that. You know, you can go online to WCLK.com and go back and hear an NDI interview I did back in 2014 on her Songversations album. We literally had a songversation for an hour. And it was beautiful. But one thing that I loved about that was it was preserved. And I remember doing interviews, and Deb can remember this, doing interviews in the 90s, the 2000s, and you were the only one who had it. Mm-hmm. So the internet is a great way for us to always preserve our culture as radio people. I also think that as radio people, we have to remember that we are the masters of all of that. When you look at the fact that, just like here in Georgia, the fact that here in Georgia, Georgia is probably the most essential state in the union when it comes to popular music. And I say that because you look at all the people that created the genres. You look at soul music, and it was created by Ray Charles. You look at gospel, and it was created by Thomas Dorsey and Villa Rica. You look at disco and house, and it was created by Hamilton Bohannon out of Newton, Georgia, who went to Clark. You know, you got that. That's Hamilton Bohannon. He showed the world how to 4/4. You know, and you think about that, and you think about the fact, and we can just keep going on. You can look at funk with James Brown. You can look at Fletcher Henderson and how he created the template of the big band. Georgia is so important, and I feel like Georgia-based organizations should be doing more to preserve our culture because and accepting that fact. You know, first of all, you have to accept the fact. You can't preserve something unless you find it worthy. And you have to say, that's worthy. And sometimes we don't say that. Sometimes we kind of take it like, oh, you kind of knew through our intentions that it was worthy or through our thought. But we can't depend on that. We have to say it's worthy, and then we have to move.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Yeah, the others, you know, like in the world of print media, I think it depends on the organization. I think a lot of organizations have done a terrible job because Creative Loafing, for instance, you know, the ownership had some weird digital strategy that basically ended up a lot of stories, thousands of stories got just lost. So a lot of writers and editors depended on the sites to archive their own work. You know, they say, oh, my stuff's online, so, you know, I can go back whenever. The stories are gone. So unless you have a print version of it, you don't really have, you know, what it looked like when it came out. Maybe you have the article that you wrote, but you don't have the published piece. So I think it's important to, there's a guy who I work with in Charlotte, and he actually took his stories off of their site and moved them to his own personal site, just so he can keep them, you know. And I'm sure he's still working on it because he was there for like decades. But, you know, you don't want to lose your personal work that you've done, but so much of that has been lost. So you can't really rely on these organizations sometimes because they're a business, and if sometimes they go out of business and all their stuff is gone. If nobody buys them, then they're just gone. So, you know, I think the other side of it is it's great having stuff archived, but I think like organizations like this library and other organizations, you know, find, like what you did with Quincy is like find opportunities to highlight that stuff. You know, like Turner Classic Movies, like they have all these movies that you're not just going to sit and go through all of them, but they may have a show where they highlight, you know, based on something going on in today's world, you know, a news item, they'll highlight a film or something. I think it's our job to go back and find ways to expose people to this archive material too. You know, when you were talking about like appreciating, you know, the culture, it's funny, there was downtown, there was a building where they recorded the first country song. Basically what was considered the first country song ever was recorded in Atlanta. But they tore that building down. They tore the studio down. They built Margaritaville. And they tried to fight it. Atlanta Preservation Society tried to fight it, and they, you know, but man, they tore it down. Isn't that a shame? I mean, and that's just a building. The music, you know, exists, but yeah, you have to really have an appreciation for it in the first place, and then have, you know, maybe the wherewithal to fight for that. But But yeah, I think that some organizations do a terrible job. It's up to you as a creator to find ways to hold on to your stuff and make sure that your stuff can be highlighted. And it would be great for organizations to find ways to highlight archive material, in a fun way, an interesting way, tributes or whatever.
I have a few thoughts in that space, and so I really appreciate. I didn't know all of Georgia, all of this from these different genres was started in Georgia. So thank you for that. That's information I didn't have, and I agree with you. It's up to us to preserve that. I want to answer the question in terms of what can libraries, and especially Auburn Avenue Research Library, be in a position to do. One thing about Auburn Avenue Research Library, unlike any other library except for one in Metro Atlanta and probably in the state of Georgia, is, first of all, it has a theater. First of all, it has a theater that's available free to the public. Secondly, it has an accessible stage, where most stages, even the larger stages like the Fox or the Alliance, do not have an accessible stage. And so for artists, regardless of your mobility or issue, this theater is accessible upstairs and downstairs. It has a balcony. And so opportunities for this library to really pub to the community, to have placemaking, to have your show here, to have your exhibit here, to have your artistic presentations here in the community is amazing opportunity. I mean, hello, bring your band. We've had performances here. Bring your band, bring your arts exhibit, bring your dance recitals, bring your artistic things in order to capture it, in order to preserve it. It's available for you. And so this library, unlike any other library in the state, I would say, there's only one of the Atlanta Fulton County Library that has accessibility, and that's the Central Library, but it absolutely is not as accessible as this particular space. And so what Auburn Avenue Research Library could do, and what we as artists can do, is really utilize this space. Utilize it for every form of artistic expression, every type of performance and visual arts expression. This space is available. And so for the library to make it known, and to maybe partner with because independent artists, we need help financially. So to be able to partner with grant writing and things like that. And so those are ways that we could work together with the community to really talk about what's happening on Auburn Avenue, what's happening at Auburn Avenue Research Library. That's very helpful and very useful for the artistic community. One thing that also in terms of preservation, and this is an issue that's happening globally, not just within the Black community or not just in America, and that is the value of preservation. We're so into what's new, what's now, what's next, that preservation, the fact that, that existed in 1998. What? So-and-so wasn't even born in 1998. Who cares about that? Oh, you're going to care about that when that no longer exists. Or did you know? These things are important, but if we don't preserve it, if we don't value it, value the significance of it, we care about our grandmama and our granddad and our big mama and big daddy, and we don't have pictures. Well, nobody took a picture, And so we have to start valuing and capturing for preservation purposes, for your own preservation, and then figure out the importance of that. And so that too is important for us to have a value for our own culture. This is the last thing I will say on that piece of it. And that is, I want to talk about James Earl Jones, because something that he did you guys hear what he did, God rest his soul? He made it possible for his voice in perpetuity to be used by Disney for Darth Vader. Okay? His voice can now be used forever. People will know his voice from now on. This man understood preservation of his likeness. His likeness. That, when I heard that, I was like, look at that man, look at that black man who understands the value of people say, your voice, your voice, your voice, your voice. Everybody from now on will know that voice. And that's so powerful. When I heard it, it just made me tingle. Because I was like, look at that. I don't know anybody else who's preserved their voice like that in perpetuity forever. 2,000 years ago, 2,000 years from now, it'll be possible to hear that voice. That's so amazing to me.
You know, it's interesting you say that, though, because now there's kind of a dark side to that, too, because a lot of actors are afraid of AI. And so what happens is people in these contracts are having it where they can use your likeness without your permission, and they'll make a movie and you didn't walk on the set.
That's right.
I mean, they have these AI prompts now that I forgot the one that makes movies, but like it's pretty good. Like, and you never showed up. So you have to really make sure that you have representation that could be like, I don't want you to do that for me unless I give you permission, and I want to get paid. I want to get a cut, you know, and you better give me a nice cut, because I'm sure James, his estate got a nice check for that, right? So that's the dark side of it with AI. AI is really going to be a way to exploit all this archive material in a way that you may not necessarily want, or in a way that you're not being compensated for. So,
and that's why I think you need to own and
Yeah.
make sure that it's attached to you.
that's right.
You know, to you, because yes, someone can take it and then someone said, well, didn't that belong to so and so? Did you give them? You know, we have to speak up for the value of everybody else's, because you're right, that
Yeah.
dark side is real.
Yeah, and like these AI things, they're crawling through stuff right now. They're crawling through your voice. They're crawling through anything, and they'll be spitting out stuff. And so the legal side of it is something that hasn't caught up with technology. You know, technologies move faster than the laws. So now we got to play catch up. But it's gonna be interesting. You know, but I'm glad that James did that, though. You know, it kind of makes you think about these companies that came along in the last few years and bought these catalogs from artists. And, you know, they may pay, you know, Willie Nelson or somebody like $100 million or whatever. And look, I'm like, that's great. I'm glad, I'm happy for them, because you may never get a chance to exploit your catalog in that way and make that much money. You know what I mean? But at the same time, now they get to do whatever they want to with your stuff. So.
All of your comments bring up another point that I constantly think of for future researchers. You're all maintaining and managing your own archives, your own preservation practice. But what about the future? Who do you trust to manage your archive, to keep your memory? And are you making those kind of decisions now? Are you building those relationships now? Is it an organization? Is it a family? Are you building a trust around it? What are you doing for when you leave? Where will this go? Like, a lot of times, from my experience, when we see collections coming from people, it's from family members, right? They go into a house, somebody's passed away, they don't know what to do with all this stuff. They're like, I know it's valuable, but I don't know what to do with it. So then they reach out to a historical society and try to figure out where it can go. But if you had a say in where it should go, where would it go?
That's a great question, because a lot of times that is the thing that kind of cuts off the life of your creation. Is, okay, where is this going to live? Where, you know, is this going to go with my children? Am I going to take it to a trust, like you said? Case in point, I just finished my first film. I've been working on it for about 11 years, called Stepping Into Tomorrow, which, thank you. Oh, thank y'all. I owe y'all lunch for that. You know, one thing about that film, and I was just telling Carlton the impetus of that film, it really started with an interview I did with the great documentarian Kim Burns. Kim Burns has been so monumental in my life. I mean, I even named my band the Dangerfield Newbies after a figure, Dangerfield Newbie, that was part of the John Brown Revolt of 1859. But I learned that watching his Civil War documentary. That was how I discovered it. But I loved his jazz doc that came out in 2003, one of the greatest documents of jazz music, especially cinematic. And I saw it and loved it. I had one small gripe with it, in the fact that when he got to a particular era in the genre of jazz, he kind of skipped over, and that was the 70s and the fusion era, the electric era of jazz. So when I interviewed him, I told him that. I said, I loved your film, but I just wish you had stayed there and talked about some of that stuff. And he said, well, you should make a film about that. Mm-hmm. And that was really like why I did that movie, because I said, well, you know what? This is important. And what was very interesting is the very first person we interviewed for the film was the legendary George Duke. And when we interviewed George Duke in 2013, little would we know that 4 months later he would pass away. And so we found out very quickly that this was going to be a preservation project. And, over time, unfortunately, a lot of the people that we interviewed, Al Jarreau, James Ntume, Greg Tate, the legendary journalist,
Yes.
Carlton, Greg Tate, he is a legend. He was so incredible in the film. But a lot of people begin to pass away, even like someone like Roy Ayers, who's like non-communicative right now. He can't speak. But when we got him, he was able to tell his story. So we decided to make sure that we documented this era, because there were no resources. There were no really strong resources for this genre when we started doing our research. Like, no one really tackled this. Some people did. Saxophonist Marion Meadows is actually writing a book on it right now, but he was like, we haven't really tackled this. So it was a journey for us to kind of get a lot of things. It was kind of the same thing I did when I did a documentary on Nikki Giovanni's Truth Is On Its Way. I did a radio documentary on that, and it was so good to actually talk to her, to talk to Nikki Giovanni. And when she told Mark and I, my partner, the Dangerfield News, when we were doing our interview, she told us something that blew our minds, and we said we would have never found out about this if we had not talked to you. And she told us that it was because of that album, Truth Is On Its Way, which is a gospel-inspired album from 1971, that Aretha Franklin was able to record Amazing Grace, which is one of the biggest gospel albums. It's the highest selling gospel album of all time, but it was because of the fact that Truth Is On Its Way was so popular with young people that the heads of Atlantic Records said, okay, let her go ahead and do this gospel record, because of what Nikki Giovanni did. But we would have never known this if we had not talked to Nikki Giovanni. So I think it's so important that we remember as well that the archives are in the people. The elders are the archivists. We have to remember, one thing that I love about my 30 years at WCLK is being this young brother. Well, I'm not young anymore, but at the time when I started, being this young cat who walked into jazz radio, not knowing what that world was going to be about, but knowing I had to be there for some reason. And all the peers that came in with me all wanted to do hip-hop R&B. It was about 7 of us that came as interns. And I was the lone guy because I was the only one that wanted to stay for the jazz. But what I found out over time is that, this jazz is the secret sauce to everything. If you look at Quincy Jones really at heart is a bebopper. And when you look at bebop music, I don't care what type, if you like trap, if you like hip hop, I don't care what type of music you like. Bebop is the greatest art form ever created in America. I will argue you down. There is no art form greater than bebop music. It is the highest. It really is. It's like, because they created their own slang. We still say the things that the beboppers, we still say, give me 5. We still say that's cool. We still say these things that the bebop guys first said in the 1940s. So the people, we have to remember that the people are the archivists. And then the people are going to be the archivists, to your question, to carry this on. And I look at my daughter. I'm always talking to my daughter because my mother did this for me. God bless her soul. But I always tell my daughter, sweetie, if I'm gone, you have to remember this stuff. Like, you got to remember this. You're going to be the one that remembers this stuff for me. And you may not even want to hear me telling you this all the time, but I'm putting this stuff in your name. I'm writing these songs. When I write this music, you're on my publishing. I have my daughter as my publishing partner, because I want her to understand, like, no, you own this. This is because people have been doing that in other communities for so many years. And so we have to do that. And I just feel that our children are going to be that. If you don't have children, find a child. For real, find somebody young, go talk to them, mentor them, and encourage them to remember how important it is to keep these stories going.
What's your daughter's name?
Jenna.
Jenna.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I'll sort of just kind of echo what you're saying from the standpoint of, you got this DJ thing going on. The mic is up here, so I'm gonna be up here too. Thank you. It's so important that we express our stories that are valuable to us and express it to persons so that they too value our story. And I say that because I've been in situations where, when you talk the 70s, well, for many people, for many of us, you know, we lived it, and for many people, it was a part of life, but not something that we think about because we're dealing with, again, today and the preservation. And so I guess I want to just kind of emphasize that we have to tell our own story. And every stage of it is important, not just back in the 30s and the 40s and the 50s, because we know, oh, that was our grandparents' era or our great-grandparents' era. But our era is important because our children and grandchildren are going to want to know it. And so we have to let them know, like you're saying to your daughter, I say to my daughter who happens to be here, hey, I need you to know this, because someone's got to continue the legacy. And I know because everybody in here is here, that means that somebody said to you, you're the one, you've got to do this. Whether it's a teacher or a parent or a grandparent, but to value where you are now and make sure that you let someone know how important this is to you, because that's when they begin to really value that the significance of it. If we just kind of take it for granted, then they're going to take it for granted. And it's no big deal. It's not a big deal. No, it's a big deal. And I say that because just not about music, but someone had said to me I'm in the process now of doing the archival stuff for my dad and my mom. My mom had tried it to start with my father, and now my mom has transitioned. And someone was saying to me, Myrna, the things that you have in your basement, do you know the value of what you have in your basement? And I'm like, no, I don't know, because I grew up with it. What? It's stuff I grew up with. You know what? It's my mama's stuff, my daddy's stuff. You know, but what they said was they have records of history, pictures, photos of people from the 30s and the 40s, but they don't have pictures of black people from the 50s and the 60s. They don't have proof of middle class, black people. They don't have that. And so they don't have that in the archives. They don't have that in the documentation. And so to be able to capture this era, and while yes, we have it in the movies, and they like that Art Deco, that was a mid-modern, mid-century modern. Like, what was that? Whoever called it that? That was my house I lived in. Yeah. What? That was the ranch we lived in. What, mid-century modern? What is that? And so to hear it called something like, oh, is that what that is? You just take it for granted, but it's like, oh, everybody didn't have that. And everybody didn't experience that, and things that we take for granted are very valuable. And so I just want to just kind of put out there that we really need to value kind of what we already have. And I want to give two other shout outs for one other thing, because those of us who have parents who are very active and very involved, which sounds like all of us are that, again, we take it for granted. We know it's valuable, as you said, and don't necessarily know what to do with it because our parents loom large in our lives, and we want to make sure that we value it in some way. But there are musicians, composers, whose music exists right now with their children, and I'm not going to name any names, but there are two musicians that I know of right now whose fathers where composers and musicians, jazz composers and musicians, and their sons and daughters are sitting with their music, their written orchestral music in boxes. And I've said, hey, can you just allow us to play this music and do a performance and a production? And they are just kind of holding it tight because they're like, I don't know if I want to do that. I don't, because this is your parent. And you want to honor them, and you don't know if they're like me, you still hear your parents in your head say, I don't want to do that. You know, or some of that, and so you don't know what to do with it, but you know that, oh, this is precious, and how do I keep this? And so these two musicians whose fathers are jazz composers and musicians, and they're sitting on, they got file cabinets of written music scores of jazz productions that were performed, because these are musicians that have performed around the world, and they're sitting on their music not knowing what to do with it because they want to, this is their way of preserving it. They're keeping it. And I'm saying, let someone hear it, you know, and then put it someplace where it can be valued and appreciated. The other piece of it is, I know that it's a financial value. This is financial. How do you quantify the value of that? I've asked my dear friend Janet Sykes over here, how do you quantify the value of the documentation that I have? I can quantify furniture, but how do I quantify paper? Someone's written on. How do I quantify the value of that? You know, how do I assess that? And so that's a huge thing for artists who recognize, oh, this is valuable. Oh, I said, one other thing, dadgummit, Georgia is pitiful. Georgia is, this state, when it comes to the arts, is horrific. And we have taken it for granted. Georgia needs to be slapped upside the head. I want to say some other, this country, yes, but Georgia in particular. And I say that because all these people you just named that started music in Georgia and started arts in Georgia, Georgia is number 50 when it comes to funding the arts. Number 50. It's the last to fund the arts. That's appalling. That's sickening. And yet here we are, thriving, progressing, creating new things, doing in spite of the support. You capitalize on it all day long. You call it all this wonderful things about Georgia. You're using the arts to propel you without even recognizing and financing and showing financial value. Yet you capitalize on it. It's just really disheartening to that it's not. And Georgia should be ashamed. And every person associated with Georgia, from the governor to the mayors to the county people and to the funders, y'all suck, man.
And can I piggyback off of that just real quick, because I think that was a great point she made about arts funding in America. Because when you look at arts funding across the world, especially in G7 nations, you look at places like Europe, like the UK and France, the UK in particular, is a small little island that is now inspiring the whole world. Like, there are so many artists coming out of the UK because of art funding, because they actually take the arts so seriously. I mean, you look at South Korea, and South Korea took this genre, K-pop, and literally turned it into something that would now contribute to 4% of the country's GDP, which is massive when you think about that. When you think about K-pop actually impacting it, because they found this thing. And first of all, that wasn't even their style. They took that from New Jack Swing. K-pop comes from like a 90s style that we tossed away. You know what I'm saying? Like, we love our New Jack Swing. We hear My Prerogative, we dance to and all that. But we don't understand, like, they saw it and said, ooh, there's value in that. While we just toss it away. First of all, we have to understand that we should toss anything away culturally. Let's be real clear, even if it's something you don't like. Because I told someone just recently, I'm like, trap music You may not like trap music, but the world's trapping right now, so there's something behind that. It inspired the whole world, just like jazz, it changed the whole world. When Louis Armstrong and Duke Ellington went to Europe, it changed the whole world. Well, you can go to a favela in Brazil and a kid is listening to trap like Nuck If You Buck. You know, and you think about that and you're like, yeah, I don't like that, but okay, get over that. Get over that. It's still part of the culture, and we have to understand that as Americans, to your point, as Americans, because I didn't know that fact about Georgia. I kind of feel it, you know, being an artist in Georgia, like, yeah, there's nothing for us. But as Americans, we have to understand that there's an American way about everything. You just look at the Second Amendment and how we take that and just have been running with that. And that's just based off of white fear. But if you look at our music and the things that we've created, we, as a people, and institutions like this have to say, you know what, let's do something on trap music because Atlanta is the hub of that. Why are we talking about that? Because we could learn something about ourselves if we just listen. But we have to respect it, like Myrna said, we have to respect it first. Because if you don't respect it, then it's just disposable in your mind. And another culture is going to be like, oh, this is your garbage? Thank you. I got this. Oh, y'all don't want your New Jack Swing? Okay, we got this. And next thing you know, you got black kids now wanting to hear their version of New Jack Swing. And you wonder why.
Can I just, before you jump in, I want to make another point about what you just said, Jamal, that because being involved with the U.S. culture and our sharing our culture internationally, we are the only nation, G7, first world nation, that does not have a ministry of culture. We do not have a department, since our things are called departments. We do not have a department of culture. Yet, if you would quantify the export, the value of our music and arts going out of this country, the closest thing we have to a ministry of culture is the NEA. Yeah. And the NEA's budget is nothing compared to the budgets that are bringing in less GDP to this country than the arts. And I include entertainment, film and arts, and all of the creativeness that's happening in America. We do not have a ministry or a department of culture. And yet we talk about the American way. We talk about the culture. Everybody does. There's not one department of culture in America.
I just want to say one thing about the estate, like planning and that kind of thing. Yeah, I do think it's very important to find people who are going to steward your archive, your estate in a good way, because when you look at what was going on with Prince's estate, it's like, it's not been managed the greatest. It's funny, like even like brands like Soul Train. Like I was thinking the other day, there's nowhere I can go and just watch Soul Train. I gotta go on YouTube and somebody put a tape up and it's cloudy. And now I think BET has some, and the Sun has some. It's like you gotta really figure out, because I have like copyrights on characters, and I'm like, okay, of course I want to give part ownership to my children, but it's like also, can we set up some kind of, I don't know, foundation or trust, or like you think about like characters like Peter Pan. It's a family that controls Peter Pan, even beyond like public domain. It's like you have to go and like deal with them. When you want to do James Bond, you got to deal with the Broccoli family. Like, so it's like, who is going to really be a good steward of your intellectual property? So you really that's something to consider if you want to manage well,
Thank you. So this is work that I'm actually very passionate about, finding creative ways to preserve your work, especially when you have limited funds and resources. My company, the Radical Archive of Preservation, please write this down, www.theradicalarchive.com. Is a site that you can go to and not only find production companies that were started and or are run by Black artists today, a list of those companies, right? In the state of Georgia, we don't have a Black performance art collection. There are like African American collections, there's collections here at Auburn Avenue, but focusing on the Black performance arts, we do not have a collection. So it's not one place you can go to find out just about Black performance arts, but you can go to the Radical Archive of Preservation, AKA Trap, because we are inspired by trap music to find alternative and creative ways to liberation, right? So the radicalarchive.com. Also, my day job is Heritage Works. Heritage Works is a for-profit archiving agency. They archive the work of MSG, Arthur Blank, all the sports agencies, some law, insurance companies, but they are for-profit, so they're very metric-based, but they hire me. So when we were going through this, interview process, that was one of the things that I said, well, will you be able to commit to community archiving, or what would that look like here? And one of the ways is like doing a little bit of pro bono work. So I am committed to trying to find ways to get Heritage Works to support community narratives. So please, 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 if you are looking for places to help you think about where your archive will go, even if you're thinking about how can I continue to support my parents' archive, what should I do, what kind of decisions do I need to be making, what do I need to be thinking about, please reach out to me. And I want to be able to help, at least push you in the right direction. TheRadicalArchive.com. We may have time for a few questions. Okay. So the floor is opening up to questions. If you have questions for any of our panelists, please, we can get a mic to you, or there's a mic at the front here.
Either the front, or what would you prefer to sit down? We'll do that too. Any questions?
Your parents teach you to stand up. Thank all of you for what you're doing. When this facility concept was put together many years ago, about 10 years before you actually saw the building, one of the things that we were very concerned about, I'm Janice Sykes with the mouth, okay?
Yes.
The whole concept of copyright. Now, I've been to workshops over the years, and copyright techniques for the average person have changed, but also the copyright laws we need to look at very carefully. There are some changes that have happened in the past 10, 15 years, and there are probably going to be some changes coming up if you all talk about copyright.
Well, I will say one thing about copyright. The interesting thing about copyright is that it gets you on paper, but the main thing is you really have to make sure your work appears in public first, okay? And you want to make a record of when it appears and make sure that people see that you did it, because you can be copywritten and somebody still could come and steal your stuff. And then it's like, do you have the legal wherewithal to battle them? So that's really what it is. It's kind of like a game of chicken. It's like, are you going to, challenge this or not? And a lot of times people have their stuff stolen. There's nothing they can do about it. So just make sure that enough people know that you did it so that they won't, whatever entity comes along, won't have the gumption to steal your stuff. A lot of stuff is falling in the public domain. Public domain has kind of been, the time has been increased where things do fall in the public domain, but it's still a thing. It's interesting to understand about public domain too, is like, for instance, Mickey Mouse. The original Mickey Mouse is now in public domain. Mm-hmm. But you can't do the Mickey Mouse that came from 1950. You got to do Steamboat Willie. And if you don't do that incarnation of that character, then you will be sued. And you will be destroyed because it's Disney. So same thing with Superman, and Batman is about to fall in the public domain in a few years. So, but it's that original form. So it's really interesting to understand. I mean, copyright is very fascinating. But the main thing is, get it in front of as many people as possible. You won't even be able to get a copyright if you haven't been out there anyway. So you have to show your work to the public, go get the copyright, but make sure that you really make a big deal out of letting people see or hear whatever you have done, because that's the only thing that's really going to save you. It's going to be public shaming, you know, if somebody steals your stuff. So one last thing, I remember it was Ray Parker Jr.? He wrote this song, and this guy recorded it and won a Grammy. But he never said nothing about it. Was it Ray Parker Jr.? He never said anything about it. No, well, see, that was later. So he never said anything about it. He never took legal action against the person because everybody knew that he wrote the song. Everybody in the industry knew, so he said, you know, I'm not going to start anything. And he went on, he got a lot of jobs because people really knew. But years later, he did Ghostbusters, and he got sued by Huey Lewis and the News because it sounded kind of similar to I Want a New Drug. Yeah. And, he had to pay him. So, it's a weird thing. So, anyway.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah.
Good afternoon. My name is Nathan. Thank y'all for being here and thank y'all for doing this. My question is for you, Myrna. What do you suggest, going back to your suggestion or your vehement encouragement that we let someone know how important our archives are to us, our memories, our copyrights? Just on a personal note, I've had people in my life who really didn't understand that, and I've had, suffered some damage to my art and to my archives and to my memories from that. So how do we start that conversation with people in our lives who are close to us who want to know or don't want to know or want to misunderstand or want to understand, if that's at all clarifying, how important this work is? Because obviously it takes a certain type of person to want to do that.
First of all, I applaud you for your talent and your desire for preserving. Is it audio or visual that you have?
I'm an all-around
Okay.
artist.
Well, I would say, and I'm open this for you guys too, for sure, since both of you are that. The first step, I say, is to find someone who is complementary to what you're doing. It may not be someone that's closest. It may not be a family member. It may not be someone that you want to be able to value what you're doing, but somebody else that connects with you. And because as artists, we're very, as Erykah Badu's, I'm sensitive about my stuff. Yes. And so we're very sensitive about it, and it's very personal to us. And so in that, we want it to be valued by other people. And if the persons that are around you, closest to you, don't yet see it, because a lot of times we take things for, he's always been that way, she's always been that way. That's just what they do. That's how family, especially, and those people closest to you are. And so a lot of times we have to kind of go outside to get our valuing. And once we get that, then eventually they will. But the first step is to whoever's complimentary. A lot of times, let me just use this weird example. Football teams have cheerleaders. And all the cheerleaders are not girlfriends of the football players. You know what I mean? But you got a cheerleader. And so you look for that cheerleader that's there in your life, because all of us got at least one. And talk to that person and say, hey, can you help me? Because it's also hard for us to ask for help. It's because we're sensitive. We just are. We're expressing that which is in us, in us. And so because it's so very tender, it's who else cares about me and my tenderness. And if it's not yet someone today, because you're desiring of it, that person's gonna come around because it's needed, it is necessary. Does that help?
Amen. So
Can I just say one more thing? Where should people go to find the most up-to-date work? Where do you want people to go to find you, whether it's social media or email or anything?
You can find me at Jamal Ahmad, just Ahmad Jamal backwards. You can find me online, social media. Of course, we have a website, dangerfieldnewbies.com, and WCLK.com as well. Yeah.
Thank you.
For me, on all social media as the Myrna Clayton Experience, or go to myrnaclayton.com, and that's where, and also for my nonprofit, you can find me at showability.org, but myrnaclayton.com.
And yeah, you can go on Facebook, Instagram for 20th Place Media or Slo Mo Media, and you'll find stuff.
Cool.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you. And yours, Dr. Radical?
Oh, yes, the radicalarchive.com or at dr.shadyradical on Instagram.
All right, awesome. We're going to thank everyone. We're going to thank them and clap on outside the door because we got the next team here. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. And let's go ahead and get ready for our next panel. We have just about 3 minutes before they start. So let's take all conversations outside in the lobby. Thank you all for coming. Thank you all.